Immanuel Kant. And so you got this great scientist, all of a sudden, he wakes up one day, he's like, I was just contacted by like aliens from Mars, and like they're telling me all these things. And he goes to like a queen, like a very important woman's like estate, and her father just died, no, her husband just died, and she's missing like the banknote that she needs to like pay off the debts or something. And Swedenborg supposedly like astral projects and like finds the banknote in her drawer or something. So Kant is like, okay, I gotta distance myself from that. So he ends up writing a whole book called Dreams of a Spirit Seer, bashing Swedenborg. So he's bashing Leibniz and Swedenborg. So he's turning against them. Thank you. All right, just for introduction, like if you really haven't heard of this, the first part of Kant's book is called the Transcendental Aesthetic. Transcendental not meaning like otherworldly or soul or supernatural. Transcendental just means it's like reasoning about reason, or like talking about our logic. It's like, using logic and reason to explain our own thinking. And then aesthetic, if anyone knows ancient Greek, do you know aesthesis? Think about synesthesia, anesthesia. Do you know what thesia? What is it called? Thesia. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Senses. So aesthetic means senses, like your sensation. So basically, he's talking about like what's like the beginning of our like reasoning process. So he says space and time is what not filters, but everything we know comes to us in the form of space and time. So Descartes might say, oh yeah, I think therefore I am, and I will continue to exist because God sustains me, and all that stuff. But the problem is, like, you say the soul is immortal, you say the soul persists through time, but all of your concepts of persistence and time, that all comes from like our senses, like all your senses. Basically, he's like David Hume, but he's saying all of our knowledge comes through the senses, but there's a special twist on it. I'll try to explain later. Oh yeah.
This is all from one book, correct?
Yes.
This is one. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. So space and time, they're not merely relations, as Leibniz says. So back before Kant, Leibniz was a German polymath. He developed calculus, not with Newton, but against Newton. I'm not sure if you know like the dx derivative notation and the integrals. That was all Leibniz's notation. So he was very smart. He came up with the first formula for kinetic energy. All bodies have some living force or something inside of them. Anyways, Leibniz says, space is merely the coexistence of all material objects, and time is merely the succession of events. So they're not anything in themselves. Time and space don't exist apart from anything. They all exist, they depend on things existing, they depend on matter to exist. Newton believed that God exists in everything, and if God were to destroy everything in the universe, well, that doesn't mean God goes away. It's not like God will be destroyed. So therefore, there must be something that God exists in, and that is space and time. But Leibniz is like, no, that they're just relations. So Kant, he's often confused as saying that time and space are also relations, but he's actually not saying that. He's saying that it goes deeper than that. These Leibnizian relations, like time and space as relations, those are concepts of reflection. So if you've ever like read John Locke or David Hume, whenever he talks about like there's ideas of sensation, like heat and color and sound, then there's ideas of reflection, like time and space and stuff like that. Kant is saying, yeah, there's that, but then there's the forms of our experience that goes even deeper than those abstract concepts. Like in order to talk about myself in this location, I have to have an idea of space. In order to talk about something persisting, keep unchanging, I have to think about time. And those are deeper concepts than just like relational stuff. So Kant says time to us is only linear and successive because of our subjective condition. So like Leibniz would say, time is linear because if time happened all at once, there'd be contradictions. So I'm gonna ask this silly question. I'm assuming you guys are all like 20, like 18, 20, like around that age. Okay, what were you like 19 years ago? Begins with a B or a T, the baby, and now you're an adult. So if time happened all at once, What is that? It's a contradiction.
Oh.
So you can't be a baby and adult all at once.
Is that really where that word comes from?
No.
Oh.
just an example.
Okay, I was so ready to
just an example. So Leibniz is like, yeah, if time happened all at once, one person would be a baby and then they'd be an adult all at the same time, and that's a contradiction. And it also goes against God's harmony, like God created the world harmoniously and there's no contradictions. But Kant is like, no, that's not why time is linear. It's not because God made the world this way or blah, blah, blah. It's simply because that's how we're built to think of time. Like, we really can't think of time anywhere else besides linear. So it's merely a subjective condition, not an objective condition. Subjective meaning it just comes from us. All right. Oh, did I do the right? Yeah, do the right one. Okay, these are the criticisms in order of Kant criticizing all the philosophers. First, there's St. Anselm, who goes all the way back to medieval times. Then there's Descartes. Then there's Spinoza, who Professor Landy really loves. And then there's Leibniz. And then there's George Berkeley. Okay. All right. This is St. Anselm. So you don't have to read this. I'll explain this to you. So St. Anselm, he starts with the assumption that whatever exists in our mind has lesser existence than whatever exists outside of our mind. So like your idea of a chair has lesser reality than a real chair, if you all agree. So he says, okay, we all have an idea of God, that which has the greatest existence, that which nothing greater can be thought of. And so if God only existed in our mind, well then we could think of something greater. Therefore God must exist. That's all what this says. Don't worry about it. That's all that's it. Anyone else need any elaboration? Do I need to go over that? Because I'll get to his criticism, but does anyone want this repeated? If that makes sense.
Wait, so that was St. Anselm's
argument. That's his argument?
That's
Yeah.
not the critique?
Not the critique.
Okay, right.
Is everyone good? Okay. So this is the problem though. So Kant says, I'm using Old English, existence, not a characterizable predicate. So to say oh, the chair has greater existence, my idea has lesser existence, all that talk about greater and less existence makes no sense, because existence, there is no lesser or greater, it's all the same. So what does this mean to us? What does it mean to say oh, that has greater existence, but that doesn't? It doesn't mean anything, says Kant, because existence is not a characterizable predicate. Existence, the concept of existence, doesn't tell you anything about what that thing is. So this is what I mean. Oh, this is a critique. I just explained it, so I don't need to read it. You don't want to be here forever. But if you want to go back to that, it's fine. So he uses example of money. I forget what German money is. I think it's marks or something. He used German marks. I think that's what they're called. So he says, okay, imagine a real $100 bill. Then imagine an imaginary $100 bill. This one has greater existence. That one doesn't. It has lesser existence. The problem is, the fact that they have greater or lesser doesn't tell you the value of them, doesn't tell you, okay, this is worth more than that. Because they're both $100 bills. We both ascribed $100 to them. So he's showing that our concepts of things don't conform to the things themselves. Just because we have a concept of greater and lesser existence, doesn't mean that, it doesn't tell us anything about the individual things, their value or worth. I have trouble understanding this one, but maybe we can, does anyone else need elaboration? Because I do have trouble with this one too, but he's saying that existence is itself, as a predicate, it doesn't explain anything. Yeah?
Is he saying that it doesn't matter, basically, or?
Obviously, I get what you're saying, obviously, I would take a $100 bill over an imaginary one, but he's saying $100 is a good predicate, that tells you what it is. But existence, lesser existence, greater existence, that doesn't tell you what it is,
Because they're both still $100, whether or not they're more or less real.
Good, yes, exactly. Thank you. I need people to help me.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I understand that in terms of the things that we put the values onto, because that's it's both ascribed by our own brains that whether or not it's real. But for things like a chair or something, that's kind of where I'm lost on the idea of
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, I have a harder time with
Oh yeah, our idea of a chair and a real chair, if you want to say there's a difference, they both represent the same thing. They both stand for a chair, but the real chair is more real than our idea of it. Like,
Right.
if that makes, I don't know if that.
Yeah,
makes
I think it
sense,
does, yeah.
All right.
Basically, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, this is now Leibniz. He even criticizes this. He's like, to talk about the greatest existence, you know, because we say God has the greatest existence, that makes no sense. That's like talking about the greatest possible motion. So think of like think of this part of the bike wheel going as fast as possible. All right, so everyone imagine or try to imagine this thing going as fast as possible. We know through like physics or whatever, well, according to his example, we know that this part goes faster than that. I think I'm right. So
You are.
So he's like, okay, well we already just imagine this going as fast as possible, like faster than anything else. And now we're told, okay, this goes faster. We have no idea. Like we can't even comprehend that. So that's like saying, you know, God has the greatest existence. Like, what is greatest existence? It's just as silly as greatest motion. There is no such thing as greatest motion. So even Leibniz criticizes that. Okay. So these are the paralogisms have been argued. Scholars say, or some people say, like they're against Descartes. Like we went over this in Professor K's class too. So he goes over this. Yeah, people think it's against Descartes, but then some of it's against Leibniz, some of it's against Locke. So yeah, you'll probably notice who's against who. First, paralogism. Paralogism meaning your content is right, like the content of your logical argument is correct, but the form of it is wrong. So I'm not an expert to really point out like what's wrong or whatever, but try to bear with me. So the first paralogism is when Descartes says that the soul is a substance.
Sorry, could you define paralogism? I actually have no idea.
Oh yes, it's like para means across, and then logism like logic. So like it's like it's not fake logic, but like oh yeah, the form is correct. Like you set the argument correctly, but the assumptions or the content. Like,
Oh, that's what
is
that. Okay,
wrong.
sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So Descartes defines substance is that which depends on nothing else but itself. So substance persists through the arising and perishing of its properties. So like, you know, the wax, for example, like, you know, you put it near the fire, but it changes shape and maybe color and smell, but it's still like gooey, you know, it's persisting. The problem is, Descartes says, but my awareness, Kant says, but my awareness of myself does not tell me that I will continue to exist, or that I'm an independently existing mind, as Descartes says. Like he says, like you know, because I can doubt my body, and my senses are illusory, I must be a mind. Like that's what my essence is. And Kant's like, well, that, you know, just because you're aware of yourself as a mind doesn't mean that you independently exist as a mind. So my concept of substance depends entirely on the persistence of objects in my subjective perception. So you don't have to answer this. But remember, in the transcendental aesthetic, all of our experience is conditioned through time and space. So really, Descartes thinks he can just a priori, through logic and abstract thought, he thinks he can prove that the soul is a substance or the mind is a substance. But Kant is saying, all your concepts of persistence and substance and all that stuff, that depends on your experience, and that's subjective. It's not a priori. And then, so this is where I get, from my experience, by seeing things not change, or, you know, in relation to each other, that's where I get my idea of persistence. So it's not a priori. It's not abstract. It's merely based off our experience. Furthermore, Descartes doesn't even tell us what things can be substances or how to identify them in the empirical world. So the wax, like, he doesn't even say like if the wax itself is a substance, or like, you know, like it's like changing so much. It's like, okay, is it like? I hope you get what I'm saying. Like he says, you know, matter is a substance, but like, okay, is a chair a substance, or is a person a substance? Like he's not even telling us what exists by itself, or what exists independently. Okay, simplicity. Descartes also says, because I can't cut my mind into parts, you know, I can cut my brain into parts, but I can't cut my mind into parts. Like I can't cut thoughts into parts. Therefore, my mind is partless, and so I'm a simple substance. My soul is a simple substance. It can't be cut into parts. But Kant says, the only reason why I can call myself a simple substance, because the I, and I think, is the condition of all my thoughts. So just as space and time are the conditions of all of our sensory experience, the I, like awareness, that's the condition, that's the form of all my thoughts. So I can't think of anything without also having that I. Like Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. So he says, and this gives us the appearance that our mind is simple. Like this mere form, like this mere, form. Like it's not a substance. It doesn't have any substance to it. It's merely just a way that we think of thoughts, or the way that we have thoughts. It gives us the appearance that we have a soul that's a substantial soul and simple. Just as space and time are the forms of our sense perception. The I is a priori form of my thinking. It's a subjective condition of all my thoughts. Only in this sense can I call myself simple. So then he says, what if there are 1,000 souls in us, all producing thoughts, and then our thoughts are the combination of those thoughts? We don't know. We have no idea, because all we are aware of, or all we have is we're not aware of that stuff. We're only aware of what we're thinking. Okay. Third one, personhood. So if you read John Locke or had the modern philosophy class, you know that Locke says you're the same person as long as you are conscious of yourself. So if you don't remember what you did, or if you have amnesia, if you have lobotomy, you're not the same person if you can't remember what you did, or if you're not aware of yourself. So the problem is, though, Kant says, so far as I am perceived by an external observer, so if someone is like seeing me, they see me in time. But so far as I'm aware of myself, I perceive time in me. So it's a very, he's really showing how it's all subjective. Like personhood is not some objective thing. Like it's not like, it's not like you guys all remain persons like forever. You're only a person insofar as I'm observing Owen, and I'm only a person insofar as I'm observing myself in time. See how it's all conditioned by time? Yeah.
Does it have to be a physical observation, or could it be
so.
Talking about Abraham Lincoln?
That's the thing. See, if we call Abraham Lincoln a person, even if we're not looking at him or aware of him, it's that we're saying oh yeah, he's an objective person, he's a real person. But it turns out, according to Kant, he's really not. We really can't say, because we're not seeing him. So see how weird it is. He's showing how it's all subjective. You really need time and space to say all this stuff. So same thing. Descartes cannot say minds are partless outside of space, because our ideas of them are partless, and so he can't say that personal identity is timeless, because our concept of the soul is timeless. So I'll explain this. The next one explains what this means. So the fourth one, the last one, is called the ideality of inner and outer experience. So he's basically criticizing Descartes for thinking that just because you can't cut thoughts into parts, and because you can cut bodies into parts, just because you can't think of them in the same way, you think of them differently, doesn't mean they are different. So he's showing how there's not a idea, things in themselves don't automatically conform to how we think of them. So Descartes' problem is, he says things are different because he thinks of them differently. And that's a paralogism, that's an error in logic. So do I need to explain that? Am I going too fast? Anyone have any questions? All right. Okay, we're basically on two-thirds, yeah?
Sorry, can we go back?
Oh, sure, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, because I don't want to be holding you guys up.
I have to be somewhere at
Oh,
4,
yeah.
so
No
I'm sorry,
problem.
but it was
Yeah,
very
thanks for
good.
stopping
Thank you
by.
so
I
much.
appreciate it.
No problem.
So are you saying
Have a
that
weekend.
because they act differently, we treat them differently, but
Oh.
just because we do that doesn't make it so? Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, so there are two things there. Us observing them acting is already, we're not observing them in themselves, we're observing them through our experience. That's one thing. And then we're treating them differently because we think of them differently, and that's another big problem. He's not saying that body and mind are the same thing, like our soul and a body are the same thing. He's saying we really can't say they're different just because we think of them differently.
And that's because the way we experience them
Yeah.
changes?
Oh, yeah.
Or is subjective?
Yes, good.
Okay.
Yes, excellent. Very good. Okay, Spinoza. I like saying his first name. Baruch Spinoza. So he's Hebrew, and his Latin name is Benedict. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just explain. Spinoza thought that the whole universe is one thing. He was called a monist. So really crazy. I like his arguments though. He's like, God is infinite, so he's the entire universe, and God's mind is infinite, so he's all of our minds, like he's every single one's mind. And I don't want to get too into it, but Descartes says God cannot be a body because bodies are divisible. You can cut them in parts, and if God were divisible, he'd be imperfect. So therefore, God can't be a body. And Spinoza's like, there's no problem in God being made of matter, because think of you have like a number line or something, like let's say it's 12 inches, and you cut it here, you have like 3 inches here, 9 inches here. Technically, the whole line is made of an infinite number of points. Like you can break it down infinitely. So the problem is, he says, which one's bigger? Like which segment is bigger? The 3-inch one, the 3-inch infinity, or the 9-inch infinity? Problem is, they're both infinity. So you can't really say anyone's bigger. So therefore he says, God is the whole universe because you can't cut infinity into more infinities. It's one thing.
Don't we have? Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, you go.
Don't we have mathematical concepts of different sizes of infinity now? I don't know if we did at that time.
Yeah, thanks to Leibniz and Newton. So yeah, like they came right after him.
Okay.
But yeah, good. That's a good observation. But you see how like it's so like abstract, like you like really no science, like it's very abstract, and that's what Kant is saying. We can't do that. So this is the briefest thing he says. He's like, there are those men who say that we can think of God and souls and stuff like that mathematically. We can think of them as like, we can treat them like we could treat mathematical objects, geometrical objects, but we can't. That's misapplying geometrical concepts to metaphysical ones. So for instance, like Descartes and Spinoza, they both were like each other. They both named their books like Proving God Geometrically or Proving the Soul Geometrically, and Kant's like, you can't do that. That's you can't do that. Same thing here. He says, just because we have so Spinoza says, God is absolutely necessary. He must exist. One of his arguments is like, God is a necessary being, and let's say if he were to be destroyed, or if someone were to destroy him, that thing would have to be like him or above him. If it's like him, just like two infinities, if they're like each other, they're one thing. And if it's above him, well then that thing is not God. But Kant is like, you can't be using those concepts, necessity, absolute necessity, like that doesn't, we don't have no idea what that means. So he's like, yeah, you can't do that.
So is this argument there basically just being like, you guys are completely off, don't even try to like be using these kind of like
basically
physics and logic?
Yeah, because he believes everything is supposed to come from like the senses, everything's supposed to be based in like the senses, and this stuff is not, it's very abstract. Okay, then we have Leibniz. Almost there, we're almost done. So Leibniz, he is famous for calculus, for kinetic energy, hexadecimals. Like he wrote a whole book on hexadecimals. It's binary code like zeros and ones. Hexadecimals are 0 to 9 and then like A to G, like using all these letters to write codes for computers. Computer networks use hexadecimals, so he was a very smart person. Anyways, he believed. Bye, see ya.
Bye, thanks, Johnny.
He believed the entire universe is made of minds. So he's not saying there's like eyes and rocks and eyes and water and stuff, but he's saying like there really is no such thing as matter, like solid matter. It's all energy, and these energies are akin to a soul. So like for us, our soul's energy is that of perception, like we perceive, and then for rocks, their energy is like kinetic energy. It's merely like physical, energy or whatever. So he's like, he's an idealist, meaning he doesn't believe in matter existing in itself, and like he believes like everything has a soul and all that. You'll see. Okay, so the first problem is it's called the amphibole. Amphibole is another Greek word. It means misunderstanding, misapplication, or equivocation. So like, I think I got this right. I don't know. I honestly I forget now. I forget what like because Aristotle came up with amphibole. That was one of his fallacies. So Kant says Leibniz's big problem is that he thinks that he can, merely by comparing abstract concepts, he can derive knowledge of things in themselves. So like merely by comparing concepts, we can know about like chairs and know about bugs and animals, and you can't do that. You need sense experience to know science. You can't just compare abstract concepts, and we'll see what those are. But they are sameness and difference, agreement and opposition, intrinsic, extrinsic, and matter and form. So sameness and difference is trying to distinguish things from each other. Agreement and opposition, you can think of like physical forces, like kinetic energy versus like momentum. I know it's not clear like that they really are against each other, but you'll see. And then yeah, so basically that's the problem, as I explained. Okay, so you don't have to read this, but this is an example of sameness and difference. So the problem is, back then, let's say we're all cavemen, and we see the sun rising one day, and then we see the sun rising the next day. The problem is, we're cavemen, so we think that they're different things. Like we don't think they're the same thing. Let's pretend like we think they're different things, even though they are the same thing, the sun. But let's say you're at like Park Street. You just took the train to Park Street, and it's number 1. The train is called number 1, and then you take a number 2 train back to UMass Boston, but you don't even know that the numbers were just switched, but you still think they're different trains, like you think they're different things. So that's the context of the problem. So you'll see where we're going in the next slide.
So he's saying that's problematic to do that?
Oh yeah, he's trying to lay out, I should have explained this better, but so Leibniz gave this to explain his argument, and then Kant will say this is this is silly, you don't need to do this. So Leibniz is saying, oh yeah, this is the problem. So if we're distinguishing based on what we see, like if we're distinguishing two things just because we see them, it leads to problems like this. Like we saw them differently, like we but really, to know that things are different, to absolutely know, this is what Leibniz proposes. So for instance, let's say you have 2 cups, 2 mugs of coffee. They're the exact same color, dimensions, everything about them is the same, atomically too. Like they have the same atoms, all that stuff. I gotta ask you though, if you see those 2 cups, how do you know they're different? Like what's the one thing that like they're different? Those 2 cups, like
that there's 2 of them.
There's 2 of them, and how do you know there's 2 of them?
Because I see it.
They're
They're next to each other in the same vision.
Good. Yeah, and your vision is conditioned through space.
Oh, space. Yes.
They're different spaces, okay? So the problem is though, Leibniz, guess what he says? Remember Leibnizian relations? Space is not real. It's merely a relation. And space is not a property of something. Like black, that thing is black. It's circular. Those are properties. Space, its location, that's not a property. It's merely a relation. It doesn't belong to that thing as a property. So really, if space isn't real, how do we really distinguish them? Therefore, he says they have different souls. They have different, so that it could be energy, different energies, different souls, different minds. He thinks that like all this stuff has minds. So he's like, that's how we distinguish it. The problem is, Kant is like, you don't need to do that because you're thinking that those 2 cups are things in themselves. I'm not sure if I'm sorry if I'm using that word, but you never heard of it. You know what I mean by like things in themselves, like oh goodness, like it exists in itself, like it doesn't need anything else for it.
Like kind of how Descartes set up his arguments around like the only thing. Like,
good.
Yeah, like these things exist purely because they exist. Kind
Good.
of.
Yes.
Is it like necessary existence?
Good.
Yeah, like how Descartes saw his mind and stuff.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
So the thing is, Kant is like saying you're thinking that they exist in themselves, but they're not. They don't really. They're merely appearances. Like they're subjective phenomena. Like just because I see a chair doesn't mean the chair like really exists outside my mind. Like so he's saying Leibniz thinks they really exist outside our mind in themselves, and that's why he says we need to give them different souls to distinguish them. The problem is you don't need to give them different souls to distinguish them because you really can't prove that they exist outside your mind really. So he's saying Leibniz is making up a problem, like he's making up a solution to a problem that doesn't need to be there. If you get what I'm saying. All right, almost done. Okay, this is where I like this. This is where like a little bit of the theoretical physics come in. I'm not an expert in this, but this is the second infibly. Kant's he also tried to do physics too, but he didn't really get into that. So Descartes, I love this. Descartes really ended up trying to prove that he really was the first one to like formulate the conservation of momentum. So if you remember, he says, I don't keep myself in existence. God does. God is what's sustaining us. So really, God, he's like saying God is what is conserving all the energy. And matter does not have energy. So Descartes denied kinetic energy. He believed matter was dead, inert, lifeless. There was no energy. It was completely passive. So that's what MV means, mass times velocity. So momentum is an energy that's transferred, but it's not anything that like makes anything move. Descartes thought only God and minds make things move, and energy in the matter is what is moved, like it's what's transferred. So energy is not moving anything.
But not the matter itself.
It's weirdly like I think like I that's a really hard question. All I can say is he distinguished. He called it translation from motion. So like there's two types of motion: a chair moving, and then the chair having the energy to move, like the motion, the energy and the motion. So he's like God is what is transferring energy, and the matter is like what is moving. It's really weird. So
it's like there's like a one step removed type of thing to it. Like he's moving the energy,
yes,
which
good,
moves,
yeah.
which makes this move.
Excellent, yeah.
So
yeah,
basically, if I'm understanding correctly, what is important to understand is that there's like two different
good, yeah.
things. I don't know.
Yeah, that really explains it well. So yeah, and even his follower, I like saying his name, Malebranche. He's like French. He goes so extreme. He says nothing like really all movement is God moving it, and even when you decide to move your arm, God hears you want to move your arm and he moves it for you. Because you can't. The mind-body connection is like really weird. You can't explain how minds move matter. So, anyways, Kant is like they're both correct. Like you don't need to side. You don't need to pick a side. There is momentum conserved that is transferred, and then there is kinetic energy that moves things. So like you really don't have to get rid of them. And so he says because Leibniz picked a side, like he saw things in physics and he thought, okay, I'll apply that to metaphysics, philosophy. He's like Leibniz says, sin is not anything real. It's merely a negation of perfection. Or pleasure and pain can't exist in the same thing. They negate each other. Like you can only have pleasure, you can only have pain, or stuff like that. I know this is really weird. I was reading an article and I couldn't really explain it completely. But the point is, like as we've seen in the paralogisms and the amphibly, these are mere concepts. Like negation, positive, negative. Those are mere concepts. And while we cannot logically fit those things into a subject, this doesn't mean that the things themselves really are. So I say you can't have a 6 foot tall man who's also 4 foot tall. You guys agree? Yeah, they can't. You can't have 6 feet and 4 feet logically in the same thing, but that doesn't mean there really can't be something in itself that is 6 foot tall and 4 foot tall. I know that sounds crazy, but he's saying Leibniz is merely analyzing concepts, and he's thinking that we can really know things that are in themselves, but we can't.
How does he justify that by saying there can be conceptually something that's both 6 feet and 4 feet tall?
Oh, because basically, he's like, as we'll see, like Berkeley, all we really know is our own experience.
So it goes back to the subjectivity
of our experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just because I've never seen a 6 foot tall man who's also 4 foot tall, doesn't mean I can really say, oh yeah, that can't be, because we're merely just analyzing concepts and not actual seeing things. I know it's really weird.
Would he say the same thing about like a 4-sided triangle?
Oh yeah, basically. He would say, yeah, like mathematical geometrical concepts have no bearing on like really knowledge. Like we can't like use geometrical concepts to like say, oh yeah, we can't do that or know that. So yeah, it's really, people say like it's limiting, but it's like he would say, oh no, it helps us. So I don't know. All right. Oh yeah, the last one, same thing. I'm not going to explain this, but Leibniz. This is just Leibniz saying that this is Kant defending him about kinetic energy. because people laughed about Leibniz believing that there were souls and everything or whatever, and Kant, but it's really not important. We can go back to that if you want. Last one, this is the last one. George Berkeley. He came after Locke, and he comes before David Hume. He says like the same thing as Kant, but they're kind of different. Berkeley says, all we are aware of are our own ideas. So I wish, you can't really draw on this, but I don't really need to. But imagine like, does anyone know like the primary, secondary qualities? Like, okay, yeah. Like, so like, squareness, size, solidity, motion, quantifiable things are primary, like, they really exist. But then color and smell and taste and sound, like those aren't really, those are subjective. Like you guys kind of understand, yeah.
Was that a Descartes idea?
Oh yes,
that
it
was.
is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Berkeley takes that and he's like, okay, and Locke takes that too, and Locke says, oh yeah, things really do have shape, but they don't really have colors or taste or smell. Like those are from us. Berkeley's like, what's the difference? They all depend on us seeing them. Like Locke says, okay, there really is squareness in the chair, and then there's our idea of squareness. And we know we have an accurate perception because our idea of squareness accurately represents the squareness in the chair. Like there really is a good connection that really makes our perception really objective. And Berkeley's like, okay, I have idea of squareness, but what's real squareness? And so Locke also said, the squareness in the chair, the atoms and stuff, they cause our idea of squareness. And Berkeley's like, okay, effects resemble their causes. Like causes resemble effects because they belong to each other. And so Berkeley's like, okay, you say that like the sound causes our idea of sound, and that the real sound is like our idea of sound. But what is like our idea of sound? What is like a sound that isn't a sound? What is like a square but isn't a square? What is like heat but isn't hot? And what is like color but isn't a color? Like he's like, we don't know anything beyond our own ideas. And so you can't really say there really is an outside world, because all we know is what we perceive. And Descartes also defined idea as whatever we immediately are aware of. And so so basically like, I'm immediately aware of this chair, but I don't say it's outside of my mind. It's an idea. I am immediately aware of it, so it is an idea. And so that's Berkeley's definition of idea as well. And so Kant says, okay, he tries to refute that, and he says, remember the transcendental aesthetic, everything is conditioned through time and space through our senses. So the only way I can have ideas in my mind is if there was something external. And so my idea of myself persisting comes through me observing the outside world persisting. And so he says, I can only represent myself in time. I can only think of myself in time if I knew what time was. And time, our concept of time, is based on seeing things change and not change. So really, he says, therefore,
So much. Sorry, I gotta go.
Therefore, he says, our internal intuition, our internal sense of time, comes from our external sense of space, and therefore there must be something outside of us. And so therefore our idea of ourself is not, we're not seeing anything in ourself, like we're not seeing a self, we're not aware of a self like by itself. It's merely an abstract concept. Sorry, those are two different things, but that's basically it.
So with that last line, is he saying the external world does or does not impact ourselves?
It does impact ourselves, but we can't, it's really weird. He's also called an idealist, Kant is also called an idealist, but he says, it's really weird. He says, we need the external world to have like an inner world, but then that's all we can say. Like we really can't say.
You can't say like, you can't talk about like realness.
Yes.
Okay.
In itself, apart from us.
I see.
It's really weird, but see how it's like so subjective. But that's basically it. Isn't it crazy how like he tried to destroy every single guy. It's so sad though.
I respect that. I
Yeah.
respect that goal. Yeah.
That's basically it.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for talking.